Future of the Justice Department on the line. I want to bring in Connecticut Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal. He's a member of the Judiciary Committee. Senator, what is your reaction to what you just heard from Bill Cassidy today, the reasoning that he laid out, and basically how he got to yes, even an unenthusiastic one?
Deep disappointment, because this vote is so cravenly wrong for the country, as well as ultimately, I think, for Senator Cassidy. I think it will go down as one of his graver mistakes, and not surprising, because I have predicted all along that Republicans would support Blanche in spite of his being unfit and his being more loyal to the president than to the Constitution or to the country. And so I am really disappointed, but not surprised.
You know, at one point, Cassidy complained about what he described as a, quote, cycle of presidents using the DOJ to prosecute their enemies. And then he said this. Listen.
I am realistic that President Trump can be unrelenting on this, but this will be true no matter who the Attorney General is. When former Attorney General Bill Barr endorsed Mr. Blanche, he said Mr. Blanche will run the department as effectively as anyone can under President Trump. Some have called that faint praise. I don't think that it is. I think it is a reality.
As effectively as anyone can under President Trump? I mean, Cassidy was clear. He had what he was saying were lawfare concerns. But it sounds like he's taking those, recognizing that they might be real, and saying, well, it doesn't really matter. We can't do much about it anyway. And he might put someone worse in.
That's why this vote is so deeply disappointing, because, in effect, it's an abdication of responsibility. You know, the Senate of the United States, in its advise and consent function, has to take a stand in favor of the rule of law and against conflicts of interest and corruption, which Todd Blanche will enable President Trump to do, whether it is the cryptocurrency corruption that has enabled Donald Trump to make $1.4 billion last year alone, or the monuments and the arch and the ballroom of the East Wing, which involves donations and contributions to his PAC or other projects, or simply this sham sludge fund. I call it a thug fund, $1.8 billion to the people who rioted and were convicted of felonies, and then the tax immunity. He's enabling Donald Trump's corruption, and to say that somebody else would do the same thing, I think, is really ducking and dodging an essential responsibility.
I also can't help but think about the fact that Bill Cassidy has been in this position before. He was really the linchpin on RFK Jr. He got some assurances that RFK Jr. seemingly reneged on when it came to vaccine credibility. Vaccine denialism is what he ended up getting from RFK Jr. Not exactly shocking when you look at the pattern. But I wonder if there is a conversation among the Republicans that you talk to that this is an administration that, you know, going along to get along doesn't seem to work, because he got on board with that and still got primaried effectively by a Trump-backed candidate. I mean, is there a recognition of that? And if there is or there isn't, do you as Democrats think that there is any future moment where these Republicans will vote any differently, or does it not matter? Do the political stakes that they no longer have to be beholden to not change the underlying fact that they are just still Republicans?
As I said when I was asked repeatedly what Republicans would do on this vote, I've seen this movie before. We all have. And unfortunately, it has ended this way before. But ultimately, the answer to Republicans' lack of spine will be at the ballot box. Senator Cassidy was defeated because Donald Trump opposed him in the primary. And you would think he'd be liberated by, in effect, having nothing left to lose. That is part of why I'm so deeply disappointed, because this vote could have been a matter of conscience and conviction. And I think that his vote for Blanche is simply more evidence that the Trump cult is alive and well in the Republican Party. He has taken over that party, and Democrats need to be strong in mobilizing support at the ballot box against Republicans. We should have no illusions that somehow Republicans are going to break ranks and follow their conscience or conviction. We need to take back control of the Senate as well as the House.
I think that's probably the right conclusion to draw. You know, we're talking about Cassidy's vote. It's really the promise of a vote. Do you have any sense of when the vote itself is actually going to be?
We are learning right now what the schedule is going to be for the rest of the day. We're voting on the Russian sanctions bill, which I championed with Senator Graham. Really evidence that we can cooperate and work together on a bipartisan basis. The vote will be overwhelming in favor of scorching sledgehammer sanctions and tariffs against the purchasers of Russian oil and gas that are fueling Putin's war machine, his slaughter of Ukrainians literally every night with hundreds of missiles and drones, as you well know, and others who are watching. It is the war crime of this century. And we are saying to Vladimir Putin, and he's probably watching the Senate right now, we will stand with Ukraine. And to Ukraine, we're saying you are not alone in a very bipartisan way.
This is some of the final work that Senator Graham was doing before he died. You were his partner in this. You and I have had so many conversations about this bill because it's one of the rare pieces of legislation that had upwards of 80 co-sponsors. It was bipartisan, and yet it sort of languished in the Senate for over a year because Republican leadership was waiting for a high sign from the White House to say, all right, go ahead, you can put it on the floor now. I understand the diplomatic reasons that was done, but when you talk to the Ukrainians, and when you and Senator Graham were having conversations with people like Zelensky, how much time and leverage was lost because this bill was waited on? I recognize what you're saying about the impact it'll have now, but it could have had that impact a year ago.
That is a really important, excellent point, Ali. And Senator Graham and I went to Ukraine together 7 or 8 times. I've been there 10 times. And Zelensky came here just last week, and his message to us was, we need the tariffs bill. It has been a constant refrain of mine, and it was of Senator Graham's, and ultimately, fortunately, the White House has sided with us. President Trump has said he will sign this bill. Ukraine has turned the tide. It is now taking back territory. It's reaching deep into Russia with missiles and drones. And I think President Trump has recognized that Zelensky has cards that he can play. Ukraine has tools that they can use to finish the job. Their fight is our fight because Putin will continue this slaughterous aggression against our allies, and we will have an obligation to put our own sons and daughters in harm's way if he attacks Poland or Sweden or Finland or any of the Baltic states. And so our own national security is at stake. That recognition underlying President Trump's support, I think, is tremendously important. I'd argue it's overdue, but today we're taking an important step in the right direction.
And I know you rushed here from the Senate floor to make this live shot with us. I really appreciate that. I can also give you an update. No vote is official until it's gavelled, but it does look like this sanctions bill right now has enough support to pass. The vote currently 65-9, which makes sense. A lot of bipartisan co-sponsors. But Senator Richard Blumenthal, thank you for coming on, talking with us about that and all the other news up in the Senate right now.
Thank you.